What do you mean by childhood trauma? That was too long ago. That's how life is. You have to face your fears. People have been through worse, you know. Have you been hearing such comments when opening up about your feelings? Have certain situations been really emotionally distressing for you? You could be showing signs of PTSD. Now, we're not doctors who can help you diagnose it, but in this video, we'll take you through post-traumatic stress disorder and how it impacts our mental health. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a mental health condition that is triggered by a terrifying event, either by experiencing it or witnessing it. And like any other mental health condition, PTSD is diagnosed and treated by a licensed mental health professional. Studies suggest that 10% of women and 4% of men develop PTSD at some point in their lives. Do I have PTSD? What are the symptoms? PTSD symptoms include, but aren't limited to, depression, anxiety, social isolation, guilt, severe emotional distress, hypervigilance, uncontrollable thoughts, and intrusive flashbacks. Trauma changes the way survivors view the world. It can feel unsafe and scary to live in. So here's a reminder that it's totally okay if you feel like avoiding situations or people that can remind you of a traumatic event. And definitely know that PTSD is not a sign of weakness. Anybody could be affected. Nobody really chooses to go through a traumatic event, right? Does gender play a role? Well, to be honest, research around PTSD has been historically gendered. It was referred to as shell shock during World War I and combat fatigue post-World War II. Male-centric definitions of trauma often dominated the discourse, and it was largely associated with war and male combatants. And for quite a long time, studies around PTSD did not account for sexual violence, abuse, and assault when defining trauma. However, as per recent findings, women are more than twice as likely to develop PTSD as men. We're accounting for the general gender disadvantages: intimate partner violence, sexual and physical abuse, low decision-making autonomy, and low levels of family support as responsible factors. In the case of assault-induced trauma, gender minorities most commonly end up blaming themselves and experience a longer duration of post-traumatic symptoms. And have you heard of trauma bonding? It is a strong emotional attachment that a survivor develops with their abuser because of codependency, probably a reason why women continue to stay with abusive partners. What happens when the symptoms last for long? Prolonged exposure to trauma results in CPTSD, or complex post-traumatic stress disorder. While PTSD is generally caused by a singular traumatic event, in the case of complex PTSD, survivors find it hard to isolate triggers and move past them. Traumatic events that can cause CPTSD could include being subjected to constant bullying, childhood abuse, experiencing neglect or abandonment, or witnessing repeated domestic violence. In fact, having one's lived experiences invalidated over and over again could put people at a greater likelihood for developing CPTSD. One cannot forget that trauma is something that doesn't occur in isolation. A person's class, caste, ability, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, race, and body size. Basically, their socio-political and cultural context plays a role too. For example, the Dalit community in India continues to face multi-dimensional oppression and discrimination, from brutal physical, emotional, psychological, and sexual abuse to everyday microaggressions. The sheer volume of abuse and suffering has been indiscriminately huge and is highly possible to leave a haunting impact on people, essentially intergenerational. So if you're someone who's having a hard time dealing with the past, reach out to friends, family, or even better, a mental health professional. We've added some resources in the description box below that could help. And if you're someone who's navigated PTSD before, share your experience with us in the comments below.